Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Institute for Personal Development, where total consciousness is the new frontier. Kriya Yoga is the union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices that initiate this process.
Well, good morning and welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's Talk Consciousness. I am your hostess, Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being with us today. How are you doing today?
Good morning. I'm doing well. And you?
I'm doing great. Couldn't be better. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in today. Well, on the Voice of Yoga, we are discussing the holy orders and Dharma with the divine. But for our listeners out there who may be new to the science and practice of yoga, I would like to start off first by explaining holy orders and Dharma and what does it mean. Swami, do you mind giving us a hand and give us some background on these for our audience?
Yeah, holy orders was a sacrament is a sacrament in certain forms of Christianity, and it had everything to do with becoming a priest. And the concept of Dharma in yoga is more of a collective responsibility that we each have. And so what we've tried to do is we tried to recognize that, these sacraments that were presented in Christianity paralleled a lot of the things that we try and do in yoga. And, just like what we were talking about last week, which was the whole thing of marriage and the concept or the sacrament of matrimony as having different meaning in this model. And so what we try and do is just like we had talked a little bit last week, that the concept of marriage now has been somewhat interpreted as, the signing of an agreement between two people before witnesses, and is primarily strictly a legal matter. And the marriage we're talking about falls under, a higher or at least a different law than the government. This marriage, this union of the individual with the divine. And maybe at one time the relationships were better associated and things made more sense because individuals resonated to a different frequency. Because the wedding today, doesn't seem to last, and when the honeymoon is over and the promise of happiness and everlasting happiness tarnishes, the vow now becomes disposable. And it seems like there just seems to be too much pageantry and not enough of this connection that we talk about. And so we pretend to make things work. There's a lot more show than function. And so as, like we talked last week, the bottom line is we can be married and having sex and we're still missing the point. And so today, when we talk about the concept of holy orders, we don't want to, again, confuse it with, this process of becoming a priest, undergoing training under a particular system of a religious institution. What we want to try and look at is the simple fact, the concept of holy orders is something that comes with this internal connection. That, it's not limited to people that choose to enter this vocation, but it's something that comes with this internal connection with your divinity, with this expanded sense of self that we talk about.
Well, let's talk about, let's spend some time talking about Dharma. And I've heard you mention it before as it is like a, your call to duty what exactly is it, and how does a person figure out what their Dharma is?
Yeah, the concept of Dharma, again, comes back with, once we individuate, which once we separate from Mother, once we separate from the pattern and our need for approval, and we make this internal connection with the divine, then that is when we start to become what's right for us. Because prior to that, most of us are making our decisions based on what we think other people want us to do. That we're seeking external reinforcement. So the real benefit comes, and that's one of the reasons why I really like the term holy orders. Because first of all, the word holy to me refers back to that you are a whole person. Not somebody who is following rules and regulations, but literally somebody who has become something different. And that's what, in what we try and say, that's what religion was designed to do, to relink an individual with a source of sustenance that enabled them to become a whole person. So a lot of it comes back to, this internal connection and the importance of it with becoming an individual. Once you have internal support and you're not seeking external reinforcement, then you start to get a sense of calmness, you start to get a sense of clarity. And that gives you a better picture of who am I? Who am I? And, one of the questions that we always ask in our teaching is, what would my life look like if I was doing exactly what I want to be doing? And that, again, that question can be answered by the individual who makes this internal connection. One of the reasons why, there is so much confusion and such a lack of self-reliant, independent people is, just like what we've been saying, is that we're just not drawing from the right energy field, and we're not becoming individuals. But once you make the internal connection and you figure out what we call your unique talent is, because each and every one of us does something better than anybody else. And so with this unique talent comes with it this sense of responsibility. Like the universe is counting on each and every one of us to give back and to do something that is going to help everybody else. But for the most part, when your mind is small and your field of awareness is narrow, it's not in view. So again, in order, like your question, how do you find out your Dharma, your duty, is you have to get connected. You have to initiate your progressive cycle. You have to start to become an individual. And that's where, mentioning these sacraments, these were points of passage that, had rites of passage. And all of the things that, is my responsibility in order to become an individual. And these are a lot of the things that, when you look across the board with our Western socialization, these are the things that are missing. And as a result, we're surviving. We're chronologically aging and psychologically, spiritually remaining in this underdeveloped state. And then, like we have been talking in these shows, that's where most of our problems are coming from. We're breaking down because we are disconnected.
You talked about rites of passage. So say, somebody in their 30s or 40s and they think they've made this connection and whatever, and they haven't gone through what you call the rites of passage. Is that something that anybody can do at any time? I mean, can we play catch-up on these rites of passage?
Yeah, I think that, that even though it does have an element of timing to it, that, to answer your question, I mean, I think that it can be done. That's one of the things that we always talk about, when we talked about the eclipse and we talked about that 2-year, 2-month, and 28-day cycle, to give birth to your new consciousness, that, independent of what your chronological age is. See, because that's what I think is the beauty of the whole human experience, is that there is a part of us that is eternal. It isn't really concerned with, the sand running out. And so a big part of, your yoga practice is to, first of all, try and align yourself with that part of yourself that is unchanging, that always was and always will be. And independent of your chronological age, we could do that at any time, at any moment, and in any stage of the cycle of death and rebirth.
So somebody has become aware of their connection or is connected. What tools can they use to assist them on their path? And I guess what I'm leading up to is we had spoken in previous shows about birth charts and the labyrinth. Can these tools be used to assist somebody on their Dharma?
Oh, absolutely. I think they're excellent tools. And that's one of the things that we did talk about. You can use your birth chart as a map to plot out your developmental process. You can use your natal birth chart as a tool for your karmic pattern. So it can give you insight into, your unique talent. What is the one thing that I do better than anyone else? That can be really helpful. And then, of course, the labyrinth, which is, again, another excellent tool for programming, the different facets of the mind with imagery to produce, desired outcomes. If this is who I am and this is what I think my life should be, if there's a collision between your external reality and your inner vision, then that's where you start to make your adjustments. Because one of the things that we can always change is we can always change how we think and how we feel. And a lot of times, that's where a lot of the internal mental work is, because typically it's not always what you think it's going to be. I mean, it's some people think that if you are following your highest purpose, that your life is going to be blissful. When in fact it could be very challenging. It could be frustrating. It could be difficult. That it's not necessarily always going to be, just harmonious without any kind of struggle involved. And, using your birth chart, using transits and progressions, it can give you insight into why. Like this particular time, all of a sudden it seems like the external forces have changed. And that's where your yoga practice becomes very helpful. because you're always in a position of strength. It's always about shaping my inner state to fit the demands of the outside world. And, provided that you have this internal connection with this unchanging source of sustenance, you're tapped into your creativity, your imagination. You can constantly be changing your imagery. And, of course, participating with the external changes to keep your life on course, but always keeping yourself in a position of strength.
Thank you, Swami. Well, we're going to, let's hold that thought right there. We are going to pause for a moment to hear a word from our sponsor. We'll be with you shortly.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate.
If you are looking for a Samadhi-based experience, IPD Kriya Yoga has the goods. A complete yoga program that includes the practices and the process. Starting with the separation from mother, including the labors and tasks of the hero and the return as a whole person. Practice makes perfect only when practice is whole. Kriya Yoga is a path of action, knowledge, and devotion. Samadhi, or total consciousness, is experienced by knowing and doing with devotion. Call or click now and get started. 603-929-0303 or www.ipdtransform.com. Namaste.
Well, welcome back. For those of you just joining us, you are listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. With me is Swami Jayananda. Welcome back, Swami. We were talking about Dharma and, having the connection that can help you find your path. Now, I have a question for you. I have always thought or have the belief that the universe nudges us when it's time for us to move on, or, sometimes you get these signs or whatever it is that brings it into your awareness that you're ready for a change. Would you mind telling our listeners the story of how you became a yoga teacher? I know you used to work in New York, and then you have a very interesting story to tell, and obviously I think it has a lot to do with your own Dharma and your path.
Well, yeah, I think my story, being a New York City steam fitter, I was working on a renovation job in Radio City at the time, and I was making a weld, and this light just kind of passed through me at this particular moment. And I do remember going into the office and asking for my money, and the foreman was, quite excited about the whole thing, because he said, where are we going? I'm coming with you. It was, because that was my MO as a steam fitter. I mean, I always followed the good jobs and the big money, and so he was like, where are we going? This is the best job in the city that I know of, and you've got the best job on it, so I'm coming with you. And I was like, no, I'm going to do something else. And that was when I did come back up to New Hampshire, and just went down to the ocean, and I made a deal with the universe, and I said, if you want me to teach yoga, you support me in it. And, I made this kind of deal with this account that I had, and that was how I run my operations, and have since. And that was in 1989. But, having a sense of Dharma oftentimes requires us to give up personal goals and personal interests, and constantly measuring my will against, what's happening, what is, collectively happening. Because as you know, I mean, sometimes you make a choice where I left a job where I was making enormous amounts of money to, some weeks I make $7 but it was never about the money. It's always about having this sense of connectedness to this greater whole. And I think, and again, I think the thing that is so valuable about that is that you lose your personal desires, your personal interests, and you're more motivated by this bigger picture.
You just used the phrase "my will," and that just popped a question into my mind. How does a person know if what they're doing is my will or thy will?
Well, again, are you meeting conflict? Is there collision? Because if you can keep pace with what's happening in the external world, then there's a good chance that, you're aligning your personal interest with, whatever it is that, you're creating for yourself. Now, of course, like we talk about, there's a difference when you are consciously trying to create your reality as opposed to when you are the victim and everything is happening to you. So we do try and make very clear distinctions between, individuals that are in the larvae state and individuals that are in the adult state. And when you are in the adult state, you recognize that we are thinking on all of these different levels. And so you are constantly making adjustments. Without that internal connection and without that heightened sense of awareness and broader sense of awareness, then we kind of feel like victims. And that's collectively, I think that's where most of us operate from. Especially when you look at our Western socialization, because we're not growing old gracefully. We're not plugged into the rhythms and cycles of our natural, I want to say, progression. We're just so youth-oriented, and we're so attached to, being youthful and looking young, and so what it's done to us collectively, it's removed us from, this part of ourselves that is unchanging. And we're just so bound up in this limited sense of who we are. But now look at how it's affected us, because now you've got a population of young people thinking this is where it's at, and you've got a population of older people feeling like they're losing at life. We're not growing old with dignity and grace, and we're not growing old with a sense of connectedness to this greater whole. We don't have that sense of purpose that comes with this connection. And to me, I think that's a really valuable thing that you want to try and get in place in your life. And again, coming back to what you said, it doesn't matter how old you are, because time goes pretty quickly. And all of a sudden you turn around and you think, oh my God, it's like I'm this old, is that really you? And if you have aligned yourself with the part of yourself that is eternal, then you've got a skill to deal with that very positively, because you don't feel like you're losing at life. And it's not your concern that you might not be looking young and you might not be as desirable, but by the same token, you're not neurotic. You're actually celebrating, where you are in, your natural progression of life. We're supposed to grow old. We're supposed to transition. It's not a bad thing. And if you've got a sense of purpose, it makes it a whole lot easier.
So it doesn't matter where we start, when we start, as far as age is concerned. So the first thing that a person needs to do, like you were saying, is to we have to have this connection in order to get us started. And if somebody needs some assistance in finding that connection, then I guess they would need a teacher, somebody like yourself.
Yeah, that's the thing that we have been saying. I mean, we have to be taught how to do this, that it doesn't happen instinctually. We do not come in with the programming, and that was what the alchemists believed, that this concept of God wasn't perfect. The word perfect meaning purna, meaning whole, because nature, God's creation, wasn't perfect, which meant, that we could chronologically age and psychologically, spiritually remain in this underdeveloped state. That in order for us to grow, there had to be a departure from instinct, appetite, preservation, and survival. That's the programming that we come in with. What we need to do is upgrade it. And that's what, I think the programs that we offer here at Institute for Personal Development, assist people with, is because, first of all, we've got good information. We have gone back to the original texts, and we have, translated a lot of the deeper meaning. Just like we're talking here, holy orders isn't limited to priests. It's each and every one of us has a responsibility to give back to the collective. Each and every one of us has a unique talent. And so each and every one of us on some level has a vocation or a calling. And a lot of, how do I get that, is you need a plan. And that's how we present Kriya Yoga. That it is, it's a path of action, it's a path of knowledge, it's a path of devotion. And you employ strategies to affect a desired outcome. That this will initiate a process where you will go from unconscious awareness to self-conscious awareness to superconscious awareness. It's the whole thing of apotheosis, this process of the individual becoming divine. And, independent of where you might be in your life at this point, where you start is, give us a call, come in. We'll show you how to do it. It's not that hard. But it's a whole lot easier if you've got good instruction.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Swami. We're going to start closing down our program. So I would like to invite our listeners out there to please visit our website. You can follow us on Pinterest, Twitter, Facebook. Please keep those questions and comments and curiosities coming. Swami does enjoy hearing from you. Next week is our new moon, so that's going to be our discussion of on our show next week. Any final thoughts, comments that you would like to talk about our program this week or what's coming up next week?
Yeah, I think the new moon will be a good follow-up for today's show because, first of all, it's in Gemini and it's going to be square Neptune, which is, again, this whole thing of spiritual reality and taking it from some obscure concept, to a real experience. And with that, I will wish everybody a good day and namaste.
Well, thank you for listening to our program, The Voice of Yoga. I am Lisa Winton. With me is Swami Jayananda. We'll be signing off. Have a wonderful yoga kind of day. Namaste.